Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I'm delighted to be joined by Laura Bradburn. We're here for the match day. This is a full-time reaction from ACSOM. Celtic 2, Hamilton 0 overall. Laura, what was your thoughts on that performance?
I think certainly the second half, or the second goal, I should say, was a blessing and a curse, because what it did was obviously tie the game up for us, but it also killed it off to a great extent. It became a bit of a training exercise after that, either because of the team's own lack of motivation to push for more goals, or just because Hamilton didn't exactly make it too easy for us, even though I don't think they are, anything to write home about in terms of a team. But at the end of the day, regarding the way we've played recently in the last few results, a victory of any description, whether it's a dull one or an exciting one, is one to be happy about.
I think so. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, just like you were in the first half, with the Celtic TV in front of me and Sky Sports showing the Rangers game to my left, you're still hoping as a Celtic supporter every single game that we can claw something back. Until it's mathematically impossible, that's what you do as a football fan. I'm a realist. I know where we are, but you still hope that there's just a wee glimmer of light every time you're playing the game. Rangers are grinding out results no matter where they go. I know that there's plenty of Celtic fans will point to a refereeing decision at Easter Road this evening, but they're getting the 1-0. So I think the most important thing is just concentrate on getting these wins. So first and foremost, Philip Halloran comes in on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe, because I think only about 20 or 30% of our viewers are subscribing. So click the subscribe button. It won't cost you anything, but you will get free content on a daily basis. And Philip is coming in to say, we won tonight. That's the main thing. Hail, hail. There are nights like that. There always are, depending on this season or throughout the 9 in a row season. Sometimes you're just thinking, get the win, get home, and everyone will be happy. Caplo Mark comes on to say, completely uninspiring. A team with no direction or purpose now. Have to accept that this is where we are. Now, we were concerned yesterday as the news kind of trickled through that Frimpong was on his way. That's been confirmed today. There was a suggestion that there was a parting swipe by Frimpong. No one could actually attribute that to the player, but there has been an official response by Frimpong, basically thanking the club, thanking Lenny, thanking the fans. So again, fake news, Laura?
I mean, it's one of these situations where I didn't see the post myself. I didn't hear anything about it until I was watching the podcast. And so whether it was real or fake, whether it was one of these Instagram stories that comes and goes, I'm not entirely sure. Any professional worth their salt is going to, try and leave the club on good terms wherever possible. And I think he's done the right thing coming out and putting to rest any particular issues as far as that's concerned. I don't think, regardless of any issue he would have had, that there would have been any issue with the fans. I think the support for him was clear while he was a player for us. And I think hopefully for the majority of Celtic fans, we'll see this as a good bit of business and wish him well for the future.
As a Celtic fan, Laura, we've seen it so often over the kind of last few years, where we bring in a player of real potential who won't be able to break into, let's say, PSG or Man City's first team. So we bring them in, we develop them. As a Celtic fan, it's now pretty difficult to become attached to any player, because even when it's one of your own, even when it's Kieran Tierney, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, well, you know what, the time will come. And I think that's difficult for Celtic fans as well, because what we see or view our team as being, our club as being, there's a romanticism about that. We think everything that Celtic stands for is important. The 9, the 10 in a row was important. But to a lot of modern footballers, we are just a stepping stone. Do you think a lot more Celtic fans are coming round to accepting that that's the situation?
I think so. I think, to be honest, if you're not accepting of that situation, then it's only going to go one way, because Henrik Larsson left us in 2004, which is 16 years ago now, and the fact that he stayed for 7 years was seen as a rarity at the time. So you're talking about, he was one of the last of his kind at that time, and that was 16 years ago. So for us to be sitting in 2021 sort of saying that we expect any kind of loyalty from any of these players is something that I don't know that we can hold on to very much. I would like to think there will still be the odd exception. Callum McGregor and James Forrest are two of those that we still have just now. And I don't think that you need any more than the one or two odd ones, because to be honest, throughout your history, that out of every era of Celtic teams, bar the odd team like the Seville team or the Lisbon Lions or the Centenary team, very often your memories are of individual players. It's not of an entire team of players. And so even if we can make sure that we have those kind of lasting loyal heroes, even one or two to build a team around, I think that's the way we go forward, and we just use the ones that come in and out of the club properly. We bring them in, develop them and sell them on for profit to sort of reinvest in the squad. So
let's actually view it that we're using them just as much as they're using us then, Laura.
I would say so. I mean, I think as a club we can spin it to our advantage. We have a situation with Virgil van Dijk where we got him in at a fraction of the cost that we sold him for. He then goes again a couple of years later and becomes one of the most expensive players in British football history, and we get a cut of that as well. There's a business model to how that can work, and as long as you keep that in balance with having some of the homegrown talent and some of the sort of players with Celtic at heart, that the right mix of that can be the way that we can go forward as a modern club, I think.
I think it does. It is important to Celtic because it's part of the identity of the club, isn't it? To be able to have that kind of association or an affinity with a player who's come through the ranks. We think back to the legends of old, who many of them went from the jungle to playing for the side. I mean, you've mentioned Charlie Nicholas a couple of times tonight, and he was one such player. You've also mentioned Turnbull in the midfield, and a player who obviously you compared him to earlier on this season. Paul McStay was another one who went from Celtic fan to Celtic player. So I do
tell you the stick I got for that one, by the way.
You did get a wee bit of stick. I mean, we will be mentioning a few other names from the past as well, because obviously Celtic were wearing black armbands tonight due to two figures from the club's past. We'll come to Dr. Joe Venglos and Shuggy Edvaldson at some point as well. Now, James Pearson 88 is talking on YouTube. He says, game of two halves really, lovely footwork and build up play to our two goals, but second half we looked tired, square passes, forcing the ball. Great to get the victory, but I wouldn't say it's perfect. I think that I felt, a wee bit frustrated myself. James, I would agree with that. I think when we've got a team like Hamilton, who are the worst team in the league, they're sitting bottom of the league, they're always fighting relegation, Hamilton, and I think, Chipper Rice does a great job of, week in, week out, trying to lift that side on a shoestring. But, once we go to 2-0 up quite early in the second half, that's when we should be looking to try and do it with a bit of panache, do it with a wee bit of flair, because, the Celtic supporters watching that, and it is a wee bit uninspiring. We're, the tempo of the game is kind of drawn out. We're passing it from side to side. We're not really seeing the build-up play, the scintillating play that we would expect. Do you think, Laura, at that stage, that's when Neil Lennon should be looking at it and saying, you know what, I'm going to utilise the substitutes at that point?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's one of the main frustrations that a lot of Celtic fans would be having, even if we were in a situation where we were winning more matches. That was what was so amazing about Brendan Rodgers' time in charge. You knew that if he got a couple of early goals, you were probably in for a good afternoon or a good night, because they never let their foot off the pedal. They always went for the throat. And we're in a situation as well where it's not just a case of entertaining the fans at home. If there was any chance at all of us catching up points-wise, we're still got a deficit to Rangers in terms of goals. So we should be taking every opportunity we can to take that goal difference back down to as a minimum as possible. And, a few 5, even maybe 6-0 wins sprinkled in there can do a lot to cut that majorly down. So I come away from it feeling a little bit disappointed that when you're 2-0 up within a few minutes of the second half, that you don't go on to capitalise on that.
A couple of interesting points coming through on the comments section from YouTube. Funkman05. That sounded like a team going through the motions. Go 2 up and then just down tools and subbing players for no reason. Did a Yeti even touch the ball? And James comes back in to say good for a Yeti to get minutes. But James feels that Mikey Johnston and Welsh should probably get minutes ahead of St Mirren. It was a good opportunity to give them minutes. Also, crossball still give us problems. Turnbull doesn't make the 90 again. Does that concern you at all, David Turnbull failing to play the full 90 minutes?
I can only assume that there's a specific reason for it, because I don't ever think that I've seen him come off and thought that was the right decision to take him off the park. He's always been performing reasonably well, or in some cases been the best player on the pitch when he's been taken off. So I can only assume there's some background reason for that. I would hope that whatever the issue is, he's not going to go on to become a kind of Tom Rogic, who is notorious for not playing 90 minutes at any point. But if it has just been a case of, wanting to give other players minutes on the park, there could have been opportunities to take other people off. Callum McGregor seems to play 90 minutes week in, week out, and has done for years now. Even the chance to give him a slight rest might have been an option rather than Turnbull, and let Turnbull get 90 minutes under his belt just to see how he holds up.
I agree with that, and I think the worst time to give McGregor a rest was in the League Cup against Ross County. So it is all about squad management, isn't it? There's quite a lot of comments coming in. Ewan Boy Martin says it was bland, a win but not impressed, whereas Linda Grace Watson comes in to say bland is not what watching Celtic should be. And also we have Ewan Boy coming in, still not a great performance, very average. And I think, the win is all important, of course it is, but what you want is some kind of encouragement that, you get this impression you've heard about, it's come from Celtic, it's come from Neil Lennon, that we've got people who are unhappy playing for the club. One of them obviously has left today, and what you want to see is some of the players that perhaps don't look interested. You want to see them up in the tempo a bit, don't you? I mean, Rogic came on, he didn't have much minutes on the park, but he's a guy that, for me, I know everything that he's done for the club, and a couple of times this season he's looked good, but he just has that knack of looking completely disinterested. There does seem to be a lack of tempo at times, and it's a bit concerning, and we've raised it time and time again, that kind of post 65, 70 minutes, Laura, we do look tired, we do look fatigued. Is that again something that we need to address by getting as many subs on as possible, freshen it up?
I think, the bigger issue that we've all discussed previously is that fitness in general is an issue, whether it's the training regimes, whether it's diet or whatever's happening. We're certainly not looking as fit in general as we have done under previous managers. But while that's the case, and if nothing's going to be done behind the scenes to improve that, then we have to take advantage of this extra substitutions rule that we've got this season, and rotate quickly, especially in a situation where, with all due respect to Hamilton, they never looked like they were going to pull themselves back into the game. So there was no risk really to changing anybody or taking anybody off or putting anybody on. There was nobody there that you would have thought, coming off the bench, they'll not do the job. So I would have utilised it fully tonight. Either that, or like I said before, if you're going to not utilise it as heavily, then go for the throat, go for the 4, 5, 6 goals and try and make a real statement. Because at the end of the day, a slightly dull 2-0 win against Hamilton is excusable if you're putting in great performances any other week. But off the back of the run that we've had, a 2-0 dull win against Hamilton is not going to satisfy people, and it isn't, because we expect the team to come out and try and make a point and try and prove the doubters wrong. Basically, say, if Lee Griffiths is coming out in the paper and defending the manager against everything that we're criticising him for, then show us why we shouldn't be criticising. Show him why he's such a good coach to you, and come out and put the performance in that proves that.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Now, Sean Ross is coming in via YouTube to say build a team around Sorrow and Turnbull. Sorrow got the man of the match tonight. I don't think I would disagree with that. When I look at the Celtic side, Laura, we understand that, a player comes in and there's a cycle. So that player comes in and it's Van Dijk, there's a cycle, then he leaves. Wanyama, Dembele, we know that Edouard's coming to the end of that cycle, he's going to be off. The unfortunate thing that I think has happened with this squad is that too many of those players are coming to the end of the cycle all at the same time, and you've got 4 or 5, maybe 6 players who will be leaving, but they're pivotal to the squad. Ayer, Christie, hopefully not McGregor, Edouard, and of course Frimpong is already away. When you're looking at that team and you're trying to pinpoint the positives moving forward, if a new management team is going to come in the summer, they're going to be looking at the positives such as Sorrow and Turnbull and thinking, let's build the team around those 2 players. Unfortunately, I can't see guys like Ayer being here long term. So I look at the defence and I wonder who's going to be the keystone of that defence. I mean, I don't think we've got one at the moment, to be totally honest with you. Yes, Taylor is young enough, but I don't think he's been imposing or influential enough. We don't have that at the moment. Ayer comes out of that side and we really are struggling. Top of the pitch, Griffiths is more of the experienced player in the same category as James Forrest and Callum McGregor. Who's coming through to take the Eddie's crown? Is it Ayeti? It doesn't look likely at the moment. I mean, he might turn it around. It's certainly not Klimala, if you ask me. So, it's quite grim when you look at that, and about the only 2 kind of highlights you can see is Sorrow and Turnbull. But I take Sean's point. I think that is, what we base our rebuild on.
I would say so. I think Sorrow and Turnbull are, like you say, with so many of the other players that we have coming to the end of their cycle, Sorrow and Turnbull are really only at the start of theirs. If we can keep hold of them for another 3-4 years even, they're still relatively young, the pair of them. So I build the team around them, build their profile. I think they can provide success for us. What I would hate to happen to them is that the rest of the team crumbles around them and they're left kind of carrying the can for a number of years through a transition period that I feel is definitely coming. Turnbull might end up being more like McStay in a lot of ways if that did happen, but not for the positive, But I think we can be too negative about that sometimes as well. When Dembele left, when Moussa Dembele left, we were in a situation where we wondered if we would find somebody to replace him. And I know that there was a bit of overlap between him and Edouard, but Edouard proved to be as much of a linchpin to the team in the years since Dembele's left as Dembele was beforehand. So, I think while it is easy to get downcast about the players that are leaving, I think that there's always the opportunity for the next sort of hero to come in and take their place.
Now, Lee Griffiths comes off in 6 to 8 minutes. Is that a concern for you, Laura? Because, I mean, we're moving into February and Lee Griffiths still can't be at full throttle for 90 minutes. And we've already mentioned Turnbull. I can understand Turnbull. He went a long time without football after such a lengthy layoff until he comes in against Lille. But Lee Griffiths, he's someone that you would hope at this stage of the season would be fit enough to finish the 90 minutes. But it looks at the moment that he isn't.
No, he does. There certainly doesn't look so as if he is. And I think at the start of the season, with the issues he was having with fitness, they've been very slow to resolve themselves. Whether at this point he's going to prove himself to be fit enough for a full 90 towards the end of the season seems unlikely now. What would concern me more is, if Edouard, for example, if a last minute bid came in for him that we couldn't refuse, or if he experienced an injury of some description, then your main striker becomes Griffiths, and you've either then got to use Klimala or Ajeti, neither of whom have shown anything that proves they can be trusted in the long term. So you're in a situation where we've got 4 strikers, which is what the ideal situation should be for any team that regularly plays 2 up front. 4 should be more than enough to get you through a season. And actually what we've got is 4 on paper, but actually only 1 that we would absolutely want to see on the team sheet every week. Lee Griffiths is absolutely fantastic when he's on the pitch, but if he can't last 90 minutes, then he can only be so effective. And I think that he definitely needs to up his game in terms of fitness if we're going to be able to rely on him towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, we've won 2-0 tonight, and the strikers get on the score sheet, which is tremendous. I don't think many people would argue that we're better with two up top. Eddie and Griff are the two first choices, absolutely no doubt about it. How do you then get into a situation that, for me, if Edouard was to be lost for any reason, Laura, I actually think Neil Lennon would go one up top. How do we get into that situation when we've got four strikers? I mean, Ajeti comes in from West Ham. He comes in, obviously, with a bit of kudos, a bit of, he's got credentials, he's got calibre. £5 million from the EPL. He still doesn't look fit for me either. But again, how are you going to get fit? He's not getting enough minutes. He was pretty ineffective when he came on tonight, but it doesn't surprise me. It's going to be difficult to get that third striker up to the point where we can trust them.
Yeah, because at the moment it looks like Ajeti is still the one that you would go with out of him and Klimala, but not for any other reason than he's played slightly more minutes and obviously got a few more goals. But neither of them look particularly up to scratch. But like you say, that fitness is going to be a big issue for them if they have to come in. Griffiths is in a situation where game time can't be his excuse for lack of fitness because he's getting that game time. Ajeti and Klimala would have to be excused for a while because they would need 4, 5, 6 games to get up to speed, and we're already at a point where we've not got really very many games left in the season. So would they even be able to get up to match fitness before the end of the season? Maybe if they came into the team against St Mirren, but beyond that, they would be struggling.
The thing with Griffiths and what comes with the fitness is sharpness. His goal was brilliant, superb strike by Griffiths, but there was two chances in the first half, one of which was what I would describe as an absolute sitter, and that was from McGregor's cross, and he's kind of nutmegged himself, but that sharpness comes with the fitness as well for a striker, Laura. So you're looking at a difference between 7 goals and 20 goals for Griffiths. If he's missing a couple of chances like that, you're hoping that he can get his goal scoring touch back. Now, Highland Parry 2 comes in to bring up the point that Encham wasn't on the bench. Hope we sell in this window. Was he not on the bench due to the fact that he was a COVID casualty, do you think, Laura?
Well, I think that's something we need to appreciate. Obviously, even though they are young, fit guys, this virus can affect people in different ways. You've also got to consider the fact that Encham himself is black, and the evidence suggests that ethnic minorities suffer the effects of the virus more severely. So this is all speculation, obviously, but you can't sort of rule out the fact that he's maybe been more severely affected than just mild symptoms. And when it's a virus that mainly affects your lungs, then that's going to be a major issue for any footballer, particularly a midfielder who's having to, very often cover most of the blades of grass on the pitch. So I hope that's not the case, because if it is the case, it might take him a while to come back. But if it is the case, then obviously you would want to wish him well.
When I was looking at the squad at the beginning of the season, Laura, and we were obviously, supplementing that with new signings, I was expecting to lose a few, and I kept saying that the areas of the pitch that we could afford to lose players and sell players was basically that area of the pitch. Tom Rogic, Olivier Encham. I still believe that to be the case, but we've already lost Frimpong. There are rumours flying about constantly about Ryan Christie, but I would much rather look at Rogic and Encham. But what's the selling value now for players like that who really haven't made a big contribution this season? I mean, what were we talking about Rogic at the beginning of the year? It was £4 million, and Celtic fans are looking back at the great Rogic moments and thinking, at one point he was worth double that, he was worth more than that. But actually, when you're trying to get a 20 grand player off your wage bill, 20 grand a week player, you're not going to get much more than 3.5 to 4 million in the current climate, are you?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I think any chance that you had of getting a major fee for the players concerned would have already been reduced by the current situation going on. Combine that with the fact that none of them are playing at the top of their game, then you're absolutely going to have to end up minimising exactly how much you get in for them. I don't want us to therefore then resort to selling players on the cheap, because we have to get some sort of cash flow in. But it might end up being a serious consideration that they have to make, because as it's looking right now, potential that anybody buying a season ticket might not even get in at the start of next season. So we just need to sort of batten down the hatches as far as that's concerned and see where it takes us.
Now, we spoke at the top of the show, Laura, about the effect of young players coming in and then basically being ditched either to the bench or completely out of the 20-man squad. And we had a bit of sympathy for Connor Hazard. Obviously, he played a massive part in winning the Scottish Cup against Hearts. But there are some points coming through. One of note from Stephen McLeavy. Barkas has been thrown under the bus too many times now. I totally get that point. He comes back from his injury where he's collided with Duffy and he's fit to play, but Lenny sticks with Hazard. Then, all of a sudden, against Dundee United, Barkas appears back in goals. And now he's disappeared again. I mean, how often can a goalkeeper take that kind of blow to the confidence? Do you honestly think that Barkas might be on his way out to Celtic? Are we looking maybe to cut our losses on the goalie?
I can only assume that that's the case, because if it's not, then what Neil Lennon's done is managed to absolutely obliterate the confidence of both or two of the goalkeepers at the club. When Connor Hazard played the cup final, instead of coming out and saying he did well enough to win us the match with his performance in the penalty shootout, at least, instead of coming out and backing him and saying, he's played in one of our biggest matches, let's keep with him and back him publicly, he came out and said, no, Barkas is my number one, and that's why he was brought to the club. If you're going to do that, then you have to follow through on that, and you have to make it clear that he's your number one. I do not know what reason he didn't play for tonight. There's no reported injury that I'm aware of. We haven't played for, since last Wednesday, so it's not as if we've had a huge amount of games where he's just thought rotation was required. The only reason I can think he's not played him is, like you say, because he's maybe in the process of leaving the club to cut his losses. I can't think of any other explanation for it, really.
There's a couple of points coming in about the two strikers who aren't playing at the moment, Laura. Zinkovic reckons that Ajeti needs to go out on loan. We need a new striker, and Mark O'Brien feels sorry for Klimala. Tried his best every game, but not a Lenny favourite. There is no doubt that Klimala is a trier, isn't he? He's a worker, he's a bit of a workhorse. He'll run all day. We all cheered when he scored against St Johnstone that day after getting absolutely clattered. Gets up, pulls himself up, and a great finish. He's showing little flashes of it, but it's very difficult for a player to go 3-4 weeks with nothing to be thrown on and make an impact. And that's what we're seeing with Ajeti and Klimala. We don't have the room, the wiggle room to give players up front a game, because we're trying to get partnerships. We're trying to develop a partnership at the back because of injuries. We're trying to get our best partnership up top, because we simply cannot fall any further behind Rangers at this stage. So I do feel for Klimala. Ajeti, for me, I just think that initially the signs were very, very good, and of course at that time we weren't playing Griffiths. Griffiths was completely out the picture, but he's become a bit of an enigma. There's no doubt about his ability. You just need to look at what he's done as a footballer. The performances for Bal that got him the big move to the English Premier League. And then he comes up here, starts off brilliant, and then just tails off. Another point to note, I guess, is like Salt sitting on the bench tonight. I mean, he was a revelation first 5 or 6 games. Tailed off. Now he's not even a first pick. That happens, absolutely. I'm not sitting here looking for reasons to have a dig at Lenny by saying that players regress every time they play for him. But, it seems to be a theme, and a reoccurring theme of the Celtic side. Would that concern you at all? Or do you look at some of these players and think, they still have a part to play this season?
I think in Klimala's case, I think the comment from the viewer was pretty much bang on. I think Lennon has suffered from having favourites and having people who he definitely does not consider favourites, and I think Klimala very firmly falls into that category. I don't think that while he's not been absolutely outstanding, I don't think, as you said, that you can fault his work rate. And I think where strikers are concerned, you very rarely find a striker who works hard and doesn't get goals. It's very much a position where putting the work in will get you into the right places to score the goals, and maybe there is more to him there. But it smacks of not being a Lennon favourite, and perhaps possibly not even being a Lennon choice to have come in. And is that the reason that he's not playing? We'll never really know the full story, but what's clear is that while everybody's going on about the waste of money that Duffy, Ajeti and Barkas have been, I think the fee that was paid for Klimala was something around 3.5 million, and he's seen less game time than the rest of them. So that's another huge chunk of cash that, through no fault of the player himself, has been a huge waste of money for us.
I know, he comes in at the same time as Sorrow. He was in and around the team far earlier than Sorrow was, but you look at the impact that he's made. And I keep saying, a player like Klimala, we surely as a club, with the investment we have in youth, and the fact that we have the pick of the best players in the country, and we have had for the last decade, what have we produced from that? Because we should be able to produce a player at least of the ability of Patrick Klimala. Would he be anywhere near the first team? Would Klimala be anywhere near the first team had we not spent £3.5 million on him? My answer would be absolutely not. Now, there's a message coming in from Facebook. The chase is on. Hail, hail now. I was brought up with fairy tales at Celtic. The first season I started going to the games was the centenary year. So that whole season was built on fairy tales, and even I don't think the chase is on. It's one of these things that until it's mathematically impossible, there is always a tiny wee glimmer of hope. But you're watching the game tonight. I didn't really believe that, Hibs were going to get anything at Easter Road. And by the same token, I didn't think Celtic were going to drop anything tonight. There's going to be many more days like this between now and the end of the season.
And the other thing to say as well is, like you said, we were playing the worst team by a significant amount in the league tonight. Mm-hmm. And we didn't blow them away. I don't see us going through, even with the number of games left, I don't see us going through the rest of the season, especially when the split happens, without dropping more points. There's much better teams than Hamilton in the league, and I think we'll be showing up for that if we don't up our game significantly.
Well, this is the thing with regards to the goal difference, Laura. We need to win absolutely every game and look for another few snookers along the way. So, it is unlikely, it's got to be said. We'll be covering it every step of the way. But as I said at the very beginning of the post-match, Laura, Celtic were wearing black armbands tonight, and that was in tribute to Dr. Joe Venglos, our ex-manager, and Johannes Shuggy Edvaldsson, who actually was signed by Sean Fallon. This was during the season when, Jock Stein had been involved in a near fatal car crash, and a whole season was required for him to recuperate. Sean Fallon, the trusted assistant manager, came in and took the team for the entire season. It looked brilliant for the best part of that season, and we kind of tailed off near the end. But one thing he did do is he brought in players like Edvaldsson. He also brought in Johnny Doyle, who went on to be part of that famous 10 men winning the league team, as did Shuggy. And he introduced a lot of the young players that then, represented Celtic for many, many years to come. So Sean Fallon had a big part in Shuggy's Celtic career. But I mean, Venglos was a player, I believe it or not, I'm too young to remember Edvaldsson, but I do remember, of course, Dr. Joe taking over from Wim Jansen. Brilliant signing record when you look at the fact that he brings in Viduka, Mialbi, Moravcik. What's your memories of that era at Celtic, Laura?
I mean, I was the first real Celtic team I remember falling in love with was the Tommy Burns team, so the cadet Van Hooijdonk de Canio team. So that was always going to be a very hard one to follow up on, and winning the league with Wim Jansen certainly did as much of that as possible. I think what I remember of Dr. Joe and what is coming across in the comments and the reflections on the time he had at Celtic was, it was treated, and I remember even as a kid, I would read the papers and that kind of thing. He was treated absolutely atrociously. Now, he didn't have a brilliant record. I think I did some statistics last week, and he certainly came out, in the season he was sacked, he was by far the worst manager of the last 20 years in terms of points and things. But the one thing that you can't take away from him, like you say, is his signing record, or the way he held himself, the way he conducted himself. He was treated abhorrently in some corners of the press for various reasons, he came in a bit of a joke figure, this Doctor Who, and that was just like, you were talking to David Slate today, that was actually, and he was saying it was just a symptom of the kind of parochial way in which the Scottish press used to operate, and I think he was a major victim of that. I think you only need to look at what people are saying about him now to realise very often success and everything comes and it goes, and you can be remembered for that, but you can also be remembered for the type of person that you are, and people remember him very fondly, even though he was probably one of our least successful managers. If current people at the club had handled them the way that he did, then maybe we wouldn't have quite the opinions of them that we do have, even though we are kind of crumbling. And I think people need to remember that. Somebody who is manages themselves and handles themselves with dignity is much more fondly remembered in spite of their lack of achievement than somebody who does the opposite, I think.
No, you're right. And his legacy obviously is people like Moravchik. You look at Viduka, and as Kevin Graham quite rightly said on Monday, the trade-off was basically we sold Viduka, we bought Chris Sutton. So you then start looking into the Martin O'Neill era 2 seasons later, where Mjällby was a massive part of that. Moravchik was coming to the end of his career, of course, but he gave us some fantastic memories. And one thing that stuck with me, I was reading some of the comments that had been made over the years, and I was reading an interview from Jock Brown, and what he said was there was a conversation between him and Dr. Joe where he said, the difference between a good side and a great side is a good side might have one game changer, whereas a great side might have 3. We've only got one, and that's Henrik Larsson. So the second one that he wanted was Lubo Moravchik. So they went to watch him. When we look at this Celtic side, Laura, how many game changers have we got on this side? Is it only Edouard? Do you still think that Griff is a game changer?
I actually think that game changers in the mould of a Moravchik or a Larsson who really can produce moments of magic, I think Turnbull could fit into that category in time. The longer he's at the club, the more experience he gets, the more confidence he hopefully builds. I really think he can be the player we can rely on to unlock defences and provide those moments of magic. Rogic has provided that in the past for us, but I don't think he does it consistently enough to be considered in that particular bracket. And apart from that, you're struggling. To me, Larsson was magical, and Lubo was magical, but in a very different way. Lubo wasn't all about goals, even though he could take free kicks with either foot and he could score goals from outside the box. But very often it was just wee moments of magic between the midfield and the strike force that he could supply. I don't think, for example, a Sutton coming up to Celtic would have been as successful without a Moravchik there to put things on a plate for him. So, but yeah, from the current setup, I think David Turnbull, given time, could have that. But I'd be struggling to name somebody else who I think fits into that category.
I think one of the things that Kevin Graham always says about Dr. Joe's time is that he really needed to get a full pre-season, and he needed to get his signings in that pre-season. All these years later, it's the same old story at Celtic. But Paul Patrick makes that point. Big Viduka going AWOL as soon as he signed didn't help, absolutely, because you've seen the quality of Mark Viduka when he did come back from that exile. But yeah, we will remember them in our thoughts and prayers. Tonight, Celtic got a 2-0 win, comprehensive enough, and we look ahead to Saturday's game against St Mirren. Thanks everybody for getting involved on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. We're here all season and beyond, covering every single move at Celtic Park. All that's left for me to say is, Laura Bradburn, thanks again for joining me on a Celtic